Hello and welcome everybody. SF Live, episode 183 this Thursday morning. And I'll be joined by Dr. Mark Cruz in a few short seconds. He's the CEO of New Pacific Metals. The company just listed on the New York Stock Exchange, the NYSE, under the ticker NEWP. And we'll be talking with Dr. Cruz about why they listed on the New York Stock Exchange and talk about their silver projects. It's a silver company that listed on the New York Stock Exchange. Not too many of those around, so excited to have him on and chat with him about that as well. And a couple of reminders before we before we switch over to our guest. First of all, this is an interactive format. If you have any questions, use either the Twitter hashtag #NUAG. That's a ticker actually on the Toronto Exchange. I should have changed it to NEWP there on the New York Stock Exchange to be topical today. Or use the YouTube chat as well. We'll see your questions. We'll try to sprinkle them in if we see fit during the conversation or just at the end of our conversation with Dr. Cruz as well. And don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button, of course, on our YouTube channel, on our Twitter channel as well. We do all our interviews live, so make sure to use that to your advantage. Turn on that bell notification as well. That way you do get a push message when we go live. Also, one last thing, be reminded we're hosting Deutsche Goldmesse, German gold show, this coming Monday and Tuesday. Quite a few silver experts coming and joining us as well. We got Keith Neumeyer, Ross Beatty, of course, the former or founder of Pan American Silver, and other great experts from the space as well, 28 companies and presenting there as well. Free to register. Description is in the link below, or link is in the description below. Now let me switch over to my guest, Mr. Mark Cruz. Mark, wonderful. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. Exciting day.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. Exciting day. Not everybody lists on the New York Stock Exchange. That's a big step for a company. Before we dive into the details, why you listed and everything else, just give us a quick rundown on the company, 30, 60 seconds. Who is New Pacific Metals?
Sure, yeah. New Pacific Metals is a relatively new company in the current format. Formed in 2017 to look for silver projects in Bolivia. Got a brand new discovery announced last year, silver sand, and really, been advancing that for the last kind of year or two. Some very large shareholders, great support base. So that's who we are.
Well, pretty straightforward. Great asset. Interesting.
Yep. Keep it simple. It's
great asset, interesting jurisdiction. And let's start off with the news of today. You listed on the New York Stock Exchange. I mentioned the ticker is NEWP on the New York Stock Exchange. What prompted you for that move?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it was a lot of feedback from our shareholder base. I would say, broadly speaking, on any given day, we probably do 30 to 40% volume in the US on the OTC. And really what we're finding was a lot of investors just were precluded. They can't unless you have a main board listing in the US. So based on that feedback, we thought, well, okay, we work for our shareholders. It made sense as well, as the company's maturing, to be honest. So last year we migrated from the venture to the main board and the TSX. And really as part of that, it was always going to be a natural progression. Certainly, when we step back and look at the investing market, the US is obviously larger than Canada. And you get a lot of, silver followers there. And as you mentioned, I guess in your intro, Kai, there's really a lack of product. There's not many silver companies listed, certainly developer companies at all really listed in the US. So a combination of factors. And, we're hoping this will give us increased liquidity. And, I think as our projects, which we'll get into, progress, we've got a very exciting work program set out for the second half of the year and ongoing. Hopefully if we continue to deliver intercepts, etc., advance the project, that, hopefully will get reflected in an increased share price as well.
I was going to say jokingly, like the Robinhood hype seems to be over because I know Hecla shares have been gifted to Robinhood traders in the US before. So, but that's good. As you said, like Hecla is one of the few silver companies and names that comes to mind on the New York Stock Exchange as well, I think. So there are not very many, as you said, in terms of product. But New York Stock Exchange leads me to capital structure, of course, right? Like what does it look like on the company side? You mentioned you have strong shareholder support. Looking at it before the interview, of course, you got a couple of producers supporting you as well. Run us through your cap structure.
Sure, yeah, a little bit unique in that we've got two major, I guess, cornerstone shareholders, and they've been there from the start. So really, I think, they bought into the exploration concept. So Silvercorp Metals, who's Vancouver-based as well. Sorry, we're based in Vancouver here, everyone, hello. And certainly they're one of China's largest, silver producing companies. And also we've got Pan American Silver, and you mentioned Ross earlier on. So they're our kind of second largest shareholder. So between them, they own about 35% of the company, maybe slightly more. And I think what's fantastic, I think it's a great vote of confidence in the project, to be honest. And that's a nice thing. I mean, Pan American has been operating in Bolivia since 2005. Their San Vicente mine. They're very comfortable with Bolivia. They obviously like the exploration upside, the jurisdiction. So that's kind of the macro level. And total shares outstanding, pretty tight structure, about 158 million shares. So certainly, great discipline when it comes to managing the treasury clearly and issuing new stock. So, I think the combination of factors, it sets us up really well for I guess building New Pacific out in the
that's
future.
roughly an $800 million market cap, which is fantastic. We don't have to go into the small, like the share ownership in total, but the working capital, I think, is an interesting one. As you said, you are in the development phase. You're not a producer yet. So what does that situation look like?
Yeah, so very well funded in our treasury. We're currently sitting on about US dollars, about 48 million US, which translates into close to 60 Canadian, plus minus, depending on the FX. So certainly, our key cornerstone project is Silver Sand. It's moving through the various engineering study phases. So really, funded to take it to full bankable at the moment. However, that said, we think the exploration potential in Bolivia is fantastic, grossly underexplored on a global basis. So we are looking for other new opportunities in Bolivia, and we can chat about some of those ones we'll be testing anyway this year, but very active on the project development side as well. And we certainly do not believe Silver Sand is unique. We think there are other ones out there, and we certainly want to be the company to unlock that value, discover them for our shareholders.
Let's hone down on that just a little bit. Like Silver Sands, you mentioned a couple of times now, is advancing through this different stages. So that's the flagship asset, of course. Run us through what have you done on the project so far, and where are we at in the process? I think a PA is planned for later this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, in my career, it's one of the fastest discoveries I've ever seen. It's just incredible. So New Pacific acquired the project from private owners in mid-2017. By December of that year was the discovery drill hole. And we'll go into some of the numbers in a moment, but, think a couple of 100 meters at 1 to 200 grams silver, starting at surface. Really between 2018 and 2019, it was 400 holes have been drilled, about 100,000 meters. And to put that into context, it's the largest greenfields, exploration program in South America during that period. And that culminated pretty much this time last year in our inaugural resource estimate. So that's an independent resource estimate by AMC Engineering. And that really documented, measured and indicated, so very tightly drilled, based 35 million tons, 140 grams silver, more or less, for 156 million ounces. And a smaller inferred resource of about 10 million tons for about 110 grams, for about another 35 million ounces. So all in close to 190 million ounces. And to put that into context, Kai, it's the largest discovery in Bolivia in the last 30 years. And globally, one of the largest discoveries in the last decade, and it still remains open. So, we're doing that, as you mentioned, the PEA study, so the prelim economic assessment. And really, this is our first of our more engineering studies. There's a lot more work to be done. And that will look at how are we going to recover the silver, what's the mining cost going to look like, the CapEx, the OpEx, etc. But in tandem with that is, as mentioned, the deposit hasn't been drilled out. So we have this giant deposit. It's already upper quartile within Bolivia. It's getting there on a global stage. It's quite a large one. And, we still haven't found the feeder zones. It still remains open. So, I think the upside and the exploration story of Silver Sand is still evolving, and there's a lot more to be discovered, in our opinion. And hopefully with this year's exploration program, we'll continue to daylight that value that will get captured in the PEA. Timing on the PEA is we're shooting for the end of the year. Really, there have been some delays with international travel, and as everyone's well aware. But nonetheless, at this point in time, we remain on track. Like I said, get it published at the end of the year, and continue pushing through. Hopefully immediately from there straight through into the pre-feed study.
Let's not get too technical, but run us a bit through the exploration program right now. What is the cutoff date for drilling for that PEA, and of course resource update, which will lead to the PEA?
Yeah, sure. So the plan, just on Silver Sand itself, the project, we're planning approximately 30,000 meters drilling between now and the end of the year, plus minus. Hoping to get the rigs turning in June, early to mid-June. And we'll probably ramp up slowly, about 2 rigs into 4 rigs. Of the 30,000 meters, I would say about 70, almost 80% of it will be resource expansion. So that will be stepping outside the current defined resources, looking for new tons, new ounces. So that's really the nuts and bolts of it. I think one of the advantages to us is we've got a great exploration team. The deposit is structurally controlled. And again, so you got fractures, the silver comes up. So pretty standard, but it is quite predictable. So we do have some very, well, what we think obvious targets to follow up on from last year. So I think there's a very high degree of confidence and probability that we will hit more silver. I think the question is just how much more, as well. And I think what probably, as an exploration geologist originally I was, what is interesting is we haven't found the feeder zone for this very large, silver deposit yet. And always globally, wherever you are, you typically get your higher grades close to your source. So think of it, your veins, they come up, they form your deposit. And we haven't even looked for those yet. So we're going to go hunting for those this year in this drill campaign. And, we're pretty excited. We got a fair idea where we hope they may be. But obviously it is exploration. Let's wait and see, and contingent on success, we'll take it from there.
How deep are you drilling? What's the target depth there?
Yeah, so, and that's another good point. So the current resource, it starts at surface, and the deepest hole on average is only 250 meters, which is nothing, absolutely nothing. So that's the current resource, and that's why, it certainly will be an open pit, which is good. Some of these deep feeder zones, we'll probably drill a couple of 500-meter holes to 1,000-meter holes. So we really are going to get deep into the system, just to try and peg where we think these fluids may be coming from.
Now that's what I was getting at. Like, usually they come from depth, right? And that's where you usually find them before they start petering out. Perfect. Curious, drill costs in Bolivia. How much is a meter?
Yeah, so basically on a per meter basis, it's about, in US figures, just it's about $110 to $115 per meter.
That's including assays?
And I'd say, and including assays, so our all-in all-in cost per meter, so that includes geologist time, logging, assays, is we drill between $200 and $220 per meter. So certainly very competitive on a global basis.
That's not bad at all. That's not bad at all. You're drilling 30,000 meters. For PEA, I think measured and indicated is enough, but then for a feasibility study or feasibility study, you need reserves, so you need to upgrade it even further. What's the plan there? And run us a bit through the budget to get there. You said you're fully financed for it, but just break it down for us a bit.
Sure, yeah. So this year, and I'd say on average, looking backwards, we probably invest about $12 to $15 million per year in Bolivia. Certainly this year, second half of the year, and Silver Sand's not our only project. So when I look at our global budget, we're going to be testing two other, targets as well. I'd say between now and the end of the year, the hope is we'll invest about $8 million, $8 to $9 million in the second half of the year, really trying to ramp up. And really that program will be seamless. Once the rigs are turning, we'll kind of move right the way through and just continue drilling into 2021. And as you mentioned, for a PIA, yes, you can use all your resources, including inferred. And once you get to pre-fees, though, it's only measured and indicated. So there's really, this year we don't need to do any detailed definition. We may do a little bit in key areas for engineering purposes, really, as opposed to resource ones. But like I said, the bulk of it will be resource expansion. So think of it as looking for inferred, and obviously we can always go back and infill later on next year, if those come to fruition.
I think we covered silver sand sufficiently. PA is going to be the big catalyst there, of course, in conjunction with the resource update later this year. Silver Strike is another project, and you bought a third asset that I saw just 6 weeks ago. Run us through your overall plans then as well to sort of bolster silver sands.
Yeah, listen, the logic is, with Silver Sand, the team went in with a kind of a bit of a different view on how to explore it within Bolivia. Certainly was looking for, rather than historically, Bolivia's been known for narrow, very high grade silver mines. So think, 1, 2 meters, 3, 4, 500 gram silver. So really it was flipping the switch, saying, okay, we know they're there, that's good, but what's the area around them look like? Can we get something much larger, more amenable to modern mining? So taking the lessons learned from Silver Sand, we went looking for other areas that have a lot of similarities to Silver Sand pre-discovery. So historic mining districts in Bolivia, so things that were mined from the 1600s up to the mid-1800s during Spanish colonial times, and said, okay, the old timers were mining those high grade veins, so we know there's silver there. So from an exploration viewpoint, that's a huge de-risk. You already know there's mineral there. So that's really great. And then it was looking around and going, okay, around these high grade veins, are there small little microveins fractures that are pulling silver that we think may form a bulk tonnage target that need drill testing. And it was just using that simple logic. That's how we acquired Silver Strike, basically about a year ago. And about 6 weeks ago, our Carangas project. So similar in that historic mining districts, quite sizable for the time, historically. So there would have been, a couple of hundred people probably living there, smelting silver. And really no modern exploration at all, or very limited. What was interesting at Silver Strike, actually, Rio Tinto did some exploration for copper gold, ironically, in 1995. And they got some interesting hits. They got 60 meters of 0.7 gold, so certainly at current gold prices, we'll follow up on that. And also hit some high-grade narrow silver, 2 meters at 1.5, 1.6 kilogram silver. So certainly, again, it gives us more confidence that we know it's a mineralized system. So we just need to go in there and see if we can put some shapes around it and define some resources. So the plan is this year we'll do some initial drill tests on both of them, approximately 5,000 meters per target. And contingent on success, the nice thing is with a healthy treasury, we can just keep those rigs turning, and really grow resources, which, the team has shown they can do at Silver Sand very rapidly, and continue. Hopefully, that will be reflected, in our support from our shareholders.
We can't get around talking about Bolivia. Already hinted, you mentioned that Pan American Silver is operating a mine there, but still Bolivia, because of political history there as well, we got to talk about how is it operating in Bolivia, and tell us a bit about your experiences.
Sure. So, Bolivia's just gone through elections pretty recently, last November. So there's a new president in place. Certainly it was monitored by the European Union. Canada was there, so it was a fair election. So the current president is Luis Arce. He was former Minister of Economy. So certainly, last decade, Bolivia is one of the fastest growing economies, largely on natural gas royalties in Latin America or South America. What's interesting is what's great as well in tandem with that, and we saw the same in Peru in the mid-90s, you saw middle class developing as well. And really, what the president's looking for now is to continue to grow the economy. So certainly with the Minister of Mines, Minister of Planning Economy, the message from the president is they're looking for foreign investment. They realize the Bolivian economy itself is too small. It needs external, funding to grow. And that's in all sectors. It's in, oil and gas. It's in clearly resources, agriculture, tourism, etc. So I would say what we're seeing is definitely the economy is opening up. It is getting busier. Certainly there are quite a few, Sumitomo has been operating the San Cristobal mine there, probably top 10 silver producer or mine globally since, probably the last 15 years. Pan American's there. Glencore, one of the super majors, got several operations there as well. But you are right. I mean, it has been a bit of a background. I'd say the last big exploration push in Bolivia was 20 years ago, basically late 90s, early 2000s. And at that time, it was a very active. There would have been about 60 companies active there. All the super majors were there. And since then, Peru opened up in the mid-90s. People moved to Peru, obviously more recently Ecuador, etc. And really, I think that's what we feel, on a macro level, what we're seeing is it feels like Peru before it opened up in the mid-90s, or Ecuador more recently. And this is why we're incredibly active on a project generation scale. We do enjoy first mover status. And the more potential silver sands we can stake and acquire, as exploration opens up, that's a massive competitive advantage for us. And we're starting to see that. I mean, I'm sure some of your viewers and yourself follow, the Peruvian elections. People are a little bit shaken at the moment. Chile's talking about increasing their royalties. So it's quite interesting. You are starting to see some earlier exploration companies starting to come into Bolivia now. And I would say some of the Peruvian family-owned companies as well are starting to look around. So, if it continues on this track, certainly what we're seeing is we like operating there, no issues at all. And we think it's certainly not something we lose sleep over. And we think as I think the exploration potential is rediscovered, I think we feel it's going to get a lot busier.
It feels like it. There are not too many exploration companies in Bolivia just yet. It's still one of those countries, or at least in the minds of people, where it's like, Bolivia, right? It's still mentioned in the same breath as Venezuela sometimes, and I think that is changing, and I've noticed that as well. So seeing that and moving forward with that, I think is fantastic. How does it work with the locals actually around your project? What are the relationships there, and how does how do you call it, mineral rights, like the ownership of the mineral rights work, like the licensing and permitting?
Sure. Yeah, so I will say at a macro level, the mining law and culturally, it's probably close, very similar to Peru, just from a mining law perspective. I think the differences between Peru and Bolivia is permitting, and I've built mines in Peru. Permitting in Bolivia is a lot straightforward. Certainly, it follows the timelines. You submit your drill permit. The mining ministry, its permitting arm gets back to you within the required period. It might have some comments. You reply to them, and you get your permit. And that's what we're finding right the way through. So that is definitely in contrast to Peru, which is permitting is a bit of a nightmare. It just takes forever. Um, Culturally, people that they're Andean people, so very like the Altiplano. So you're, similar to Peru as well. And we do have a large CSR team. So that was one of the first things, when I came into the company, started building out. So I say we have a dedicated VP sustainability. And David's worked there for Rio Tinto. Rio Tinto used to have several mines in Bolivia, 14 years working in Potosi. Got fluent Quechuan speakers, fluent Amara speakers as well. And really, like anywhere else, to be honest, you just be transparent with people, be upfront, be honest. And like anyone else, people are looking for, opportunities for their family. So what we have been doing, and as the project advances, is building out those social programs and building capacity within our local communities that, okay, perhaps today you're helping as a field technician or environmental technician, but with training and ongoing as the project develops, well, we want you to be running, the environmental department or what, and working on the core skills, etc. So, to be honest, no different than anywhere else in the world. You just need to be open, transparent, be in front of people. So that's kind of where that is. Regarding mining rights, they reside with the state. So very simple. It's kind of paper staking. So if it's open ground, you stake it. The Ministry of Mines issues it. Royalty, you pay a royalty at 6% on silver. So very similar to anyone else, and normal corporate government taxes like you pay anywhere else. So very, very open, very transparent, very simple regulatory regime compared to some other jurisdictions.
Yeah, no, fantastic. I appreciate that I would say clearing it up, but just giving us some more color on that. So I appreciate that. Yeah. Let's talk upcoming catalysts. I forgot to ask when we were talking about Silver Sands, like where are you at in the drill program? Like what stage are you in? How many meters of the 30,000 have you drilled so far?
Yeah, no, we're just kicking off. Really, I would say first half of the year between restrictions and everything else was focusing on engineering studies in the PIA, getting that up and running. So really, first half of the year is doing an awful lot of metallurgy. One of the advantages of silver sand, and again, which makes it unique, is it's silver only. Typically in silver deposits, you might get a bit of zinc, a bit of lead, but this is a bit weird or unique in that it's just only silver.
That is rare, by the way. Yeah,
and the reason for that is we haven't drilled it deep enough. We haven't found the base metal zones yet. So again, it speaks from a geological perspective to the size potential. The fact that we've got, close to 200 million ounces, no base metal credits here tells us this is a bloody big system. Now, you don't know if it's going to be economic at depth, and that's why we need to drill it. And there's all the usual risk, to be clear. But it does tell us from a geological perspective, this is a big one. And the big ones tend to get bigger because for whatever reason, geologically in the crust, the right things were happening. So the 30,000 meters will kick off, like I said, in June. And that's just on silver sand. And then on the regional exploration, we'll do another 10,000 meters. So the plan is to try and drill 40,000 meters between now and the end of the year. Assuming, so I would anticipate news flow starting, drill results starting to flow from July onwards. And then it should be pretty regular, every 3 to 4 weeks as the batches come through the labs. And we should have regular news flow. And then obviously the big catalyst will be the PEA, towards end of year.
You mentioned metallurgy. Maybe that's the last question. Then we're going to wrap it up. Like, what does it actually look like, metallurgy? I was just looking at the press releases the last few months. You haven't put out any metallurgical results, at least not in the headline. I might have missed it.
No, it's part of the PEA study. So one of the things is because it's silver only. There's two ways we can recover the silver. So the test work we've done so far shows high recoveries between 85 and 95%. So you can go at what's called flotation, so which is more of tends to be a bit higher cost, gives you slightly higher recovery, or else you can do heap leach. So think, big gold, mines, etc., silver mines. I think Pan American's Dolores mine in Mexico would be a good analogy to it. So that's really where you just pile up your mineralization on a lined pad. You basically put your reagents on it, and then you recover silver over time. And the advantage of that is it tends to be more cost effective. It's more technologically simple, and tends to give you good recovery. So really, we're trying to see which way we're going to go. We've got 3 tons of material that we sent to the lab, SGS, big international lab in Lima. So those final results should be in about 4 to 6 weeks. And really, once we get them in, that will drive the engineering on what is the processing plant going to look like. But so far, no red flags at all in the metallurgy. No matter which way we go, it's just looking at which is the optimum route to maximize project economics.
Fantastic. Mark, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for running us through the story, and good luck with your listing on the New York Stock Exchange.
Cheers, Kai. Great to be
Everybody
here.
else, this was Dr. Mark Cruz. He's the CEO of New Pacific Metals, and they just listed on the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker NEWP. Quite excited to have him on, run us through it. The company is on a development track in Bolivia, one of the very few silver stocks actually listed on the New York Stock Exchange as well. So make sure if you haven't listened to the whole interview, make sure you start from the beginning and listen to it. Really appreciate you joining us. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button as well on YouTube or here on Twitter as well. And leave a comment, leave a like. We want to hear from you. And we'll be back at 10 a.m. Pacific with an expert interview.